Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for inviting us here to the Embassy of Mexico in Azerbaijan. I'm very happy to be here today. And let me start from the question that we prepared for you. What is the current state of economic interaction between the countries, Mexico and Azerbaijan?
Today is doing well. Not as much as we wanted to, but it's doing well. And let me try to explain why. The trade between both countries, and I will be able to show you a graph in a few minutes, has increased very much ever since the embassy opened here in Azerbaijan. You will see in the graph that there's a spike in 2008, 2010. That's when the Azerbaijani embassy opened in Mexico. And the same thing, then it went up a spike, it came down, and steadily kept on growing little by little. But when the embassy of Mexico opened here in Baku, the spike it's clearly visible. It goes up and comes down a little due to the economic woes that went through Azerbaijan between 15 and 16 basically. And after that, it simply just soared once again. So in 2019, the record was accomplished, and it reached 52 million point four. And I want to stress that again. The annual average trade between Mexico and Azerbaijan between 1992 and 2014, that's 22 years, the annual average was only 2.2 million. Then the embassy opened, and ever since, that has risen to the point that in 2019 it reached the record of 52.4. So that's an increase of almost 25%, 25 times, sorry. And in 2020, the trade began very, very strong. In the first month, according to statistics Azerbaijan, trade between Mexico and Azerbaijan reached 9 point something million. So we were thinking, wait, maybe we can even reach 110 or 120 million dollars, which would be astonishing, but it's very likely because of the similarity of the way that both countries are able to interact between themselves. January was very strong, February was also very strong, but then it started with March with the pandemic, and that's when it started dwindling a little. And so I want to stress the following: even in spite of COVID, trade between Mexico and Azerbaijan has improved. It reached $50.1 million last year, which means, and I don't have the graph right now, but I'll be able to show it, it just sort of went like this onto 2019, and then in 2020, it just went down a little. But it's way beyond the levels of previous years, which shows, I believe that shows sort of the base now, the new ground for bilateral trade. And that is because in spite of the difficulties associated with COVID, the non-possibility of traveling abroad, of meeting people, promoting your product the same way, we were unable last year to bring another delegation of Mexican businessmen and Mexican entrepreneurs, people wanting to present their own product. And in spite of that, still, trade went up to 50.1. That in itself is very good. It shows that pandemic did have an effect, but it almost reached what was a record attained from the previous year in 2019. So that shows that it's really going pretty well. And in that respect, there are some products that last year, even in 2020, really showed the potential, the large economic potential that both countries have, at least in these trade matters. One item is pipes from the oil industry here in Azerbaijan. I'm pretty sure you don't remember, because I'm sure I told you, but it's good to know that
previous interview.
Yes. I told you that between 9 to 13% of oil pipes for the oil industry that are coming into Azerbaijan in the 40 centimeter diameters, 9 to 11% come from Mexico. That in itself is an astounding number, and say that because Azerbaijan and Mexico are over 12,600 kilometers away, and still pipes are coming from Mexico to the Azerbaijani industry. But there are other issues, and one of them is vehicles. as you may know, you remember, Mexico produces almost 5 million cars per year. 5 million cars per year. Out of those, in 2016, Azerbaijan imported only 5 units, 4 years ago. In 2017, Azerbaijan imported around 127, if I'm not mistaken. Following year, it got to 250. In 2019, it got to 550, which you just keep on the number sort of doubling each year. And in 2020, in spite of COVID, in spite of the pandemic, not only did it grow, but it went from 555 to almost 1,500 to 1,500. Tripled in 1 year, in complicated year. So that really shows again the strength of the trade, bilateral relations in that sense. That in itself those are very good words, very good. And so, so that shows very good what's really going on. Dynamic, it is dynamic. It's moving forward very good. Other products are also doing well. Tequila, for example.
Yeah, we were talking about it previous interview.
Yeah. Tequila has been growing, and it shows the strength of the market. In 2014, that's the base point for me. Then went on to 2015, it grew. But in 2015, there was two devaluations in 2015 for the manat. It dropped. In spite of that, 2016, it still grew. And then in 2017, it did drop a little, but above the previous year. After that, it went to over 3, that's 15, 16, 17, and 18 it grew. In 19, it went over from 300,000 to 800, almost 900,000. And pandemic did affect this. And now it dropped to around 450. But still, the 450 is very important because it's still above the previous year. That is, in spite of COVID, trade, at least in tequila, is still above previous years. So that shows that there's a potential market, a very good market, in spite of difficulties such as COVID. The strength also in the vehicle numbers. In vehicles, Azerbaijan is importing vehicles between 1,500 and 3,000 cc's in the motor, and also units which in Mexico are branded so-called for tourism. Those are 12 or 15 places per vehicle, and they work well. But I believe that they're being used here in Azerbaijan not for tourism purpose, but mostly for interurban travel. That is, you're going from Baku to Sumgayet, or you take this one. So there are 12, 15 people per, and you can just go by and they drop people and they pick up people and they go home. So that type of vehicle. So that's going very well, I guess. In general, it's going well, even in spite of COVID. Now, with this year, what we're looking forward is to try to really improve this as much as we can.
What project have you managed to implement in such a difficult period as pandemic? And let's talk about the new project in the nearest future.
Very well. Last year was 2020 was a complicated year for everybody. The pandemic showed lots of things. But it's a year of mistakes. We did commit some mistakes, of course. And I guess the first mistake was to think that this was a pandemic or a disease that was going to come and just go. So basically, everybody just stopped. They were doing, and then they cared for health, which is very good. But then we didn't really quite work so well, or we need to try to accommodate ourselves. And then we thought, well, in 3 months, but then the second wave came, so maybe in 6 months. And so by the end, so last year was a year of learning, basically. What to do, what we didn't do, what do we have to do. In spite of that, in 2020, we did achieve some important things because as much as COVID showed us the difficulties we need to keep social distances, we need to use face masks to carry on. It also showed us a benefit of today's life, of today's modern life. And by that I mean, we are all using screens all the time. But now we were sticking ourselves to it. But now we're using them to communicate ourselves, which that in itself has become very, very useful. And I say this because, to give an example, last year, the first meeting between inter-parliamentarian groups from both parliaments, from Mexican Congress and Azerbaijani Parliament, was held. And it was held in a virtual manner. That in itself was quite surprising.
Online.
online, and it came out very well. That another one was also we were able to present movies. We like to be active culturally, so we present movies and paintings and photographs. But this time we were able to do them online, and we were fortunate enough also to be online with the director of the movie and the representative of the International Festival of Movies of Morelia, internationally renowned. So we were able to have them with us. And before the pandemic, we would occasionally use Zoom or Skype or something like that, but now we're using them more and more often. Not only that, we're becoming more accustomed to them. So last year we presented several movies. I recall one particularly. One is called Polar Bear, also Polar.
Mm-hmm.
The interesting thing about that is that the movie was shot exclusively with cell phones.
Mm-hmm.
They shot the whole thing with a cell phone. They did everything with a cell phone, nothing else. And so we wanted to, and it was very good. It was illustrating the way the director told us what he was doing and things like that. So it came out very well. Something we didn't really plan, but you have to organize and come up with something. Beyond that, another great moment was the Mexican National Day. Of course, as you may remember, you're accustomed to having the great show, and yes, you have the flag coming in with a civilian group coming and bringing it to the ambassador, and the ambassador tries to reinstill the cry of Dolores in 1810, and we have the band and the bell and the Viva Mexico, and so all of that. We couldn't do that this year because of social distancing, of course, because we didn't know also what to do, what not to do with COVID. But thanks to that, at the same time, for the first time, we were able to present 8 Mexican artists, internationally renowned, for the same event.
Mm-hmm.
I would have never thought about that before COVID. But then we were able to present an orchestra.
Mm-hmm.
We were able to present a harp with a guitar, piano, another piano, marimba group as well. All of them organized for the 15th and the 17th as well. So that turned out very well. And surprisingly, we were able to do it because of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing is, the videos we organized for the National Day were watched, have been seen by at least 450 people. That in itself is very good because for a normal reception here, a large reception, you have something like 400 people, which shows that at least for our concerts, the one we organized, we did have a backing and people came and saw them.
Mm-hmm.
That was very good. It was also very satisfactory. We also did something on a national basis, tried to keep up with the gender issues. It's on November 25th, but basically the 25th day of every month, the embassy would try to wear something that is orange as a remembrance to try to remember the International Day against violence against women and girls.
Mm-hmm.
A way to keep that aware, and so we put it. So we have resorted also to our social networks, to Instagram, to Twitter, to Facebook, to try to give this out, to put out the Mexican culture. This has allowed us also to be able to talk with artists, to present movies, to present some photos, some film exhibitions. But of course, another problem that came up was the pandemic, and then of course the war. That changed also the environment very much. And for example, we had prepared something very novel things. A group of theater had prepared some things. We were able to present that before the war. But then on November 2nd, as you know, it's the Mexican Day, the Day of the Dead. It's a large festivity, you know, but we decided to cancel and not to present anything due to the environment because it's not the right moment to present things like that. Now we're looking forward to try to reorganize things. Now that everything's going to come into fruition in a better way, I think we're going to do that. And what do we have for this year? This year we want to present also, we try to design the cultural activities, also economic activities and tourism. I'll come back to that also. But the cultural activities, try to design them on a screen-based idea, but be able to do it physical as well. Why? Because pandemic will be with us for a long time, as diseases have been with us for a long time. But the rules come and change. So sometimes you're allowed to go out, sometimes you're not. So you need to be able to react constantly, back and forth. And so the whole idea here is precisely that, to be able to organize something that could be in people, in presence, presencial, in physical, or via the networks, via the screen. And in that sense, we're planning to present several exhibitions, photo exhibitions, film as well. We're also going to ask several Mexican artists to present themselves. If they're able to come, even better, but at least to present and be able to have the artists to present the works themselves. That in itself is good. We're planning to do things with several museums. We've already talked to several museums, some galleries as well, to try to see how we can foresee how to organize. Right now, we're waiting to get the final rules on how to act, how to interact with the museums. And I say this because museums are now open, but as far as I understand, there's only a limit of 10 persons per museum. And I don't know if it's 10 persons per the whole museum or per just a wing or a room. How does that work? So I even came up with the idea of what I call the Mexican Carousel. That is, if a group of 10 people are allowed at a certain time, well, you can tell people, you welcome them, reception, the welcoming point. Then you go to the first room, you're able to see, and then they move on to the third room, and then you're able to maybe have 10, 20, 30, 40 people in 1 hour, 15 minutes each. I don't know. We're all waiting right now to find out rules on how to operate with the museums and the galleries. That's what we plan. That's what we're going to say. And in that sense, we're also planning to do photograph exhibitions. In fact, as you may know, I like photography, so I'm going to put some out at some photo exhibits precisely on that. Well, yes. I even opened an Instagram account. I don't know if you know about it.
Yeah, I know.
Oh, you do know?
Of course.
Well, that's even better.
I'm following. Of course.
Well, that's even better. Yeah. So yes, that's the idea. But and always remembering that this is also the Islamic Anjabi year. We're trying to do things around Islam. I'm actually learning about Islamic Anjabi, reading the poetry, which is more like philosophy and things like that. And to try to organize things around those themes. And we've been able to talk with different museums, the Modern Art Museum, the Museum de Samal, and other parts to try to organize how to present things and to work them around throughout the year. So we're looking forward to that. On the economic matter, what we want to do is we want to bring some Mexican producers, subject to COVID. And that presents a conundrum. Because, if you require a quarantine 2 weeks for a person after they come into the country, you're basically killing the mission because they have to stay quarantined for 15 days and should be able to just leaving. Now I heard maybe the COVID passport, the COVID vaccine, we need to work around that. So right now we're working in teleworking with them as to how to be able for them to send the products that we can manage, we present them, but they have them to have them on the screen presenting their own things. Hey, so Ambassador, now this bottle. Okay, this is the bottle. And they talk about it. Something like that. It's not quite easy. We need to develop that. But the one thing was clear is that we do want to promote that as much as possible. Also in conjunction with other events here in Baku that will help that. So that will be promoting trade. And another part is also tourism. Tourism between both countries has been growing. Pandemic trapped it collapsed it basically. But I also see now the new possibilities of how to share Mexican ideas. It's particularly now with the newly liberated territories in which you have several places, very natural places. It's I think I told you about this before, I don't recall, but there's a program called Pueblo Mágico. It's magic towns, a town which is it's very quaint, very bucolic, very nice. The central plaza is unique. The people living in the surroundings are very nice. Then you have a beautiful view. So in Mexico, you have pyramids and seas, so you have everything together. So instead of having just go to Quetzalan, you go to Quetzalan because you have people, you have the plaza, you have the surroundings, you have the views, you have the pyramids, you have the food, and so many things. So you're offering the tourists several and very diverse goals in tourism, and that way being able. And I believe I haven't been to those places. I've been to some already, but haven't been. So I'm pretty sure that type of idea could work very well for Azerbaijan, and therefore would be another way to try to join and become an even better relationship between both countries. As I said, and you heard me say it before, when we share, we learn. We learn, we grow together, mutually. So that would be some. And here, fortunately, these graphs are for you, but this is just what I want to show you, maybe for your people there. So this is basically the embassy opened in 14, and I arrived and came down a little, but this is the 15, this is the double devaluation, came down to the crisis, and then it came up, and it went up quite a lot.
Yeah, I see.
And it dropped down. But however, it dropped. Yes, pandemic affected. Yes, but it's basically the same. It's basically the same thing. Mm-hmm. This shows that the last years basically you just come down just about the same level and you just come there. So that's trade, and I think that's a way of really putting out what the relation, at least in trade terms and tourism and other parts, can be.
It's very nice news. Really.
Well,
what's Mexico's position on Nagorno-Karabakh conflict?
Well, as you know, Mexico supports very much the idea of a peaceful solution to the conflict, and that is essential. Another point that is very clear is we support very much the movements or the activities by the Minsk group. They've been working around it. They need to work more. They need to be more active, but we support them as the co-chairs, but also the whole of the Minsk group. And finally, very important also is to bear in mind the resolutions of the United Nations Security Council. They have to be applied at all times. Particularly the 4 resolutions dealing with that. They've been partially, but the thing is just try to keep that, essentially to make sure that international law is respected and provided according to everybody. And of course, among those principles, international law that are basic is the territorial integrity. That's a must. So we're following all events very clearly, very close, and giving them as much support as we can.
Let's talk about visas a little bit.
Visas were going pretty well. Mm-hmm. They were doing this, just as trade was growing between both our countries, just as tourism is growing between both our countries, the visas are doing basically the same thing. Last year, trade fell, tourism collapsed throughout the world. Well, surprisingly, the same thing happened in visas.
Mm-hmm. And what about now?
It's starting to come back. This year we're starting a little slow. We've only issued 1. But I think it's a good message because of 2 things. It is the first one that we issued this year, which is good. But the other part is we have installed new equipment. Mm-hmm. So that first visa is quite a conundrum. It's hiatus because now we have modern system to connect with Mexico as well for the visas. And we wanted to, and we finally got the visa to try the whole system, and it works. So that means that we can issue as much as we can. So instead of having just 1 station, we can have 2 stations to attend multiple people at the same time. So in that sense, it's going very well.
What about education? Could Azerbaijani students return to Mexico now during the pandemic to continue their studies, for example?
If anybody wants to go into Mexico, they're allowed to go into Mexico. Yes, it's on health restriction, on COVID restrictions, there's basically almost none. So you can basically do that. Before you travel to Mexico, nonetheless, I would suggest contacting us just to make sure what is the latest rules, because this thing is changing on a day-to-day basis. Mm-hmm. But it's doing very well. So if they want to, they're more than welcome. And we're just looking forward to see you in Mexico. We're waiting for you.
Mr. Ambassador, thank you very much for this interesting and useful interview. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.